Two all-new Dogman stories featuring Dogman is my friend, starting at that time on screen. And starting right now, we'd like to present My Neighbors Are Werewolves. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I would not have long to live if I told you the location of my home or my werewolf neighbors. They're very nice people, but they would have to terminate me if I betrayed their location. I know this because the mother of the family told me so when I attended a barbecue over their place this past July 4th. By the way, she makes the best barbecue. I'd usually found that to be a talent of family patriarchs, not matriarchs. But in that family, the father prefers his meat raw. So you would probably never guess that the female is even a werewolf, at least not at first glance. She looks human to me. When I first saw her, before I met her, I figured she was a Wiccan, but I was wrong. She did eventually tell me the name of her system or religion or whatever it is. I had never heard that word before though, and so I've forgotten what it's called. It's not Satanism or any religion I'd heard of. It seems to be something only werewolves, like that family, even know about. As for her husband, that guy looks like your standard werewolf type, complete with the unibrow and the fleas. He's constantly scratching himself and panting. I find it hard to stay in his direct presence for too long. For one thing, he's got dog breath. They have two pups, but I don't really know if they're boys or girls. I've only seen them in human form. But their eyes are grayish, minty, greenish blue, and seem very alien. Both have long hair, and names that could be either boy or girl names. Besides being a family of werewolves, the parents are quite bohemian. I met the father in a kind of a rough manner. It took my wife and me 2 days to move into our new home nearby the werewolf family. Even after all that, we had left some stuff back at the old place, so I went back with the car to grab up any remaining items that might be of use to us where we were moving to. On the way back, when the highway spilled off into our new neighborhood, a big 6.5-foot guy with a dog head covered in animal fur ran out of some bushes and directly into my car on the driver's side, ricocheting off like a character in an old silent comedy. Trust me though, I was not laughing. I thought I'd just run into a human being and I stopped the car. As I sprang out to look for him, I was scared of how badly he might be hurt. But I have to say, I was equally as scared of the fact that a guy wearing animal pelts and a dog head might be dangerously insane. I could be trying to help him, while he might be trying to do the opposite to me. Still, I didn't see how I had a choice in the matter, so I called out to the man, asking if he needed help, and I stepped gingerly off the road onto the soft and muddy ground, leading to the woods alongside the street. Once I stepped under the trees, I was amazed how the sounds changed and the lighting changed. It got colder, and everything smelled differently too. It smelled like the earth, I guess. It had been raining recently, and so the world in there was moist and humid, and somehow very different from what I'd been expecting. I didn't see the man though, injured or not. After a bit more searching, I started to feel stupid, and I went back to the car, where I saw that the guy had actually put a dent in my door when he ran into me. That must have really hurt, but I couldn't find him. So I figured I'd better get on my phone and introduce myself to the local police. This wasn't really the way I wanted them to first learn about me, but it would have been wrong not to report the incident. I was raised to never lie to the police, and I felt an obligation to be honest. As I was about to dial the cops on my cell, out of those same woods ran that very same crazy guy, wearing the dog head mask. Only this time, it didn't really look like a mask at all. I could see him more clearly than last time, but I could tell it was the same guy by his height and the furry animal pelts. Only this time it looked more like it was his own fur. It looked like this was not a human wearing a costume, but some kind of a dog-headed creature that ran upright like a human. I dove into the car, locking the doors. I felt like that beast was coming for me, and that it was going to bite my head right off my shoulders. As I covered my head and braced myself behind the steering wheel, the canine-headed creature leaped, not at my door or window, but instead up onto the front hood of my car, making sounds like fingernails on a chalkboard with its long dog nails, and then over the car and off into the woods on the other side of the road. I was about to hit the gas and get out of there when I realized I had dropped my cell phone outside when that werewolf-looking dog-head monster thing ran out of the woods toward me. Believe me, it took a lot to get me out of that car to get my phone back. I was seriously pricing it in my head. What would a new cell cost? Would I be willing to pay that much to avoid having to get out of the car again on that evening? I thought of the Dogman racing back out of the trees and taking me down, and I was leaning toward leaving the cell in the road. But then I thought of how angry my wife would be if I did that, and I decided that having her mad at me was probably worse than getting eaten alive by the Dogman. At any rate, I got the phone, and it was a scary drive home. I was looking over both shoulders at once, and my hands were shaking. When I saw our new house in the distance, I felt a sense of relief which instantly vanished when I saw that big, ugly Dogman sitting, like a canine, right on my front steps. When it saw my car approaching, the thing stood up on its hind legs and made a sound. Something like a howl, something like a yip, and something like a growl all at the same time. I slammed on the brakes. That thing knew where I lived. Had it done anything to my wife? The creature bolted from where it was, leaping from the top of the stairs to ground level in one jump. He ran off in the direction of the backyard of our neighbors, and I knew at once I had to warn them. Although I had seen them, we had not officially met each other yet, and it seemed our first conversation was going to have to be about the werewolf that I accidentally attracted into our neighborhood. My phone rang, and it was my wife, who was inside the house and safe. I urged her to lock the place up and stay indoors, and that I would explain why later. Jogging to the front door of the neighbor's house, I was distracted by the sight of our female neighbor inside one of the front windows. I had seen her from one of our second-story windows before. She was big-boned, and she wore long dresses. This was part of why I thought she was a Wiccan from first glance. From what I could tell through the window, she was casting a spell, using a knife and a brass cup, which are used in Wicca. There were other items and symbols around that I did not recognize at all, though.
"Do you like what you see?"
Came a deep voice from behind me. I turned around fast and stood up, somehow managing to bang loudly into the window I had been spying through. I looked upward into the blue eyes of the unibrow guy I had told you about before. It seemed he had just walked up around the house from the back. His wife was now out in front of the house too, and both of them stood there glaring at me, with their mouths hanging open at my sheer gall. I tried to regain control of the situation. I had come there to warn them, not to spy on them. I tried to tell them that there was a dog-headed werewolf who just ran into their backyard, but I stuttered, and I don't really remember how much of my intended message got through. Both of them started laughing at me, which made me defensively try again and again to explain that they might be in danger from a werewolf. The big man with a deep voice asked me,
"Hey, mister, can you tell me? Did the big bad monster look like This?
And then bam, I wasn't looking at a human being any longer. He became a hideous, terrifying-looking dog-faced mongrel man. And then, just as quickly, he returned to his unibrow human form. Only now he was making a deliberately stupid face in order to mock what the expression on my stunned face must have been in that moment. I noticed that the wife had a fur sleeve on her arm, which seemed confusing to me since it was a warm day. I did a double take when I realized that was her own fur, growing out of her arm, but only on her arm. She looked embarrassed and folded her arms over each other, trying to cover the fur patch. "Sometimes it doesn't all go away with the sunrise," she said shyly. These two didn't need protection from the werewolf. They were the werewolf. I felt like I was going to faint. I had moved my wife and myself into a very dangerous situation, and now I didn't know what to do. The two of them had a good laugh at my expense. Then we all sat down, and they explained to me the way it was gonna be. They are very well-connected people, and although I would not call them rich, they are able to do a lot more favors than your average neighbor. I won't get into it, for obvious reasons. They told me that moving in next to them was like hitting the jackpot. But, like in other windfalls and lottery triumphs, there are certain costs that need to be paid. For one thing, we maintain radio silence on the unique abilities and lifestyles of our neighbors. Secondly, we visit them when we are invited, and we never speak to them at all when not contacted. Third, we respect all contacts they introduce us to, as we would respect them. And finally, if my wife becomes pregnant, we are to inform them before anyone else, even our own family. This is the only subject we are to contact them about without an invitation. If we are expecting a baby, then our neighbors will use their connections to find us a new home in a different part of the state. It took a while to get the reasoning for this out of them, but it seems that while in werewolf form, they are unable to resist the taste of recent human offspring, so it would become too dangerous to be there at that point in time. So it's a little nerve-wracking living next to a werewolf family. I mean, we don't feel comfortable inviting either of our own families out here. At least we know that this won't last forever, and that we'd, at least in theory, be assisted into moving into a nicer, larger house. Things could be worse, I suppose, but I don't think I'll ever get used to the fact that my neighbors are werewolves. Dogman is my friend. Dear Scary Stories NYC. You know how long a Mississippi dogman can live? At least 55 years, I'll tell you that much. I know that they're real. I know that they're intelligent. I know that they're loyal. And I know that they remember human faces or scents, or maybe both. To be clear before I go any further into my narrative, you should not go up to an adult or even adolescent dogman and expect a friendly interaction. I don't want anyone hearing my story and becoming careless around wild animals. Yes, the dogman is my friend, but it happened by accident, and it happened when we were both a lot younger. So I want to say this was 1967, but it might have been 68. Things changed so much each year back then that I can usually remember when things happened based on my clothes or what music I was listening to. This was summer camp though, which I only got sent to in 67 and 68, and it was virtually the same thing both years. One of those 2 years someone found a puppy that liked to stand up on its hind legs and dance around. It had a weird looking face, kinda had a chin, which is not a very canine facial feature. It made its face taller and looked kind of a little human. To some of the kids, that made it a freak, so they started throwing rocks at it and hurting the poor thing. I rescued him and hid him away so I could nurse him back to health, with the help of one of the camp counselors. He surprised us both by being better pretty much the next day, as I remember it. He could walk on all fours fine, but he seemed to prefer standing and dancing around on his hind legs. That was why one of the adults nicknamed him Nureyev, after the famous ballet dancer from back then, Rudolf Nureyev. That weird little dog kept on surprising us by disappearing when we were looking for him, and showing up again when we least expected it. He seemed to be an excellent hunter, bringing small game back with him to camp each time we saw him. He also seemed surprisingly bigger each time as well. When the last day of camp came, Nureyev was nowhere to be seen, and so I said goodbye to him in my head, never expecting to see him again. I moved out to the West Coast when I got done with high school, and by the later 70s, I drove back to Mississippi on my Harley Davidson. I was in my 20s and feeling rebellious, but also I was going home to ask to borrow some money from my dad. On the way there, I got sidetracked and delayed by these three badass guys on these little Japanese bikes. I wouldn't exactly call three guys a gang, but I was alone, and they were ordering me to hand over my cash at knife point. Like I said, I was driving home to ask to borrow money, so the amount I had on me was not enough to satiate these cranky dudes. I don't know what they were on, man, but they started freaking out and threatening to do away with me just because I didn't have enough cash. I saw my life flash in front of my eyes, for real. I saw my whole life story, and it was a stupid one, with a bad ending. But then, out of the woods, comes this sound, like a dog mated with a lion or something. This sort of canine version of a roar, you know? Nothing like anything I'd ever heard before. And so everybody just stops. And we all freeze, looking around with our eyes. And then, bam, out of the woods comes crashing Rudolf Nureyev, but now fully grown up. He had the same coloring. He had the same ears on top of his head. And he had that same big chin. But now, he was ripped and bulked out with muscle. He looked more like a human than some kind of an animal. Like, have you ever seen when they draw Tony the Tiger to look all buff like an athlete? Well, imagine that in dog or wolf form. And you've got what I was seeing. The bikers buzzed off like gnats, and this big 6.5 foot tall muscle man covered in dog fur leaped on top of me. We both slammed to the ground, and I figured I was about to have my face bitten clean off. But no, Nureyev wanted to lick my face, not eat it. He still remembered me. I have to say, if we knew he'd grow up to look like Charles Atlas, we might have named him Steve Reeves instead of Rudolf Nureyev. It was a fantastic reunion, and one of the most amazing memories in my aging head. The way it ended, though, was somewhat alarming, I guess. A police car pulled over to ask me if I was alright, and the Dogman started growling. Then he chased them back into their vehicle and chased the cop car down the road and out of my sight. Nureyev might have saved my life, but that didn't mean he was tame. He was a wild and dangerous animal, just one that happened to remember that I was one of his best personal allies. So over the years, the stories I just told you got repeated to 2 additional generations of our family. It became our personal legend, and we figured it was all in the past. How long could a canine live anyway? Even an upright walking one? Well, in very late August of 2021, my daughter and granddaughter were driving me home from the hospital. The weather was very bad, and we were worried that we might not get home at all if we didn't get ahead of this weather. Well, out onto the road, in the middle of the rain, walked Rudolf freaking Nureyev. If anything, he looked even more muscular than before. It's possible his fur might have been going gray, but it was soaking wet in that moment. He really looked like he had not changed in over 40 years. He was so big, and he successfully blocked the road, not allowing us to pass. We looked at him, and he looked at us. And then, after just about 2 minutes, he ran off and was gone. My granddaughter was not happy. The sighting had shaken her up a great deal, and my daughter was trying to console her, while also trying to drive in the rain of what turned out to be Hurricane Ida. When we approached a bridge up ahead, we were stopped at the very last second by emergency personnel. It seemed that the bridge was not actually there any longer. It was impossible to see that from our angle, and my daughter would have driven out into the abyss. We could actually see cars stacked on top of each other, off in front of us, underneath where the bridge once was. If we had arrived a minute or two earlier, nobody would have been there to warn us. We would have been one of those cars with people trapped in them, and some of them even passed away that night. We might not have made it. We might have been casualties. But we weren't, because we got a visit from Rudolph Nureyev, the Dogman. And as I've been trying to tell you all through this, the Dogman is my friend. Please join me in thanking this episode's executive producer, Ron Barracuda, for making this episode possible. Ron spent 27 months as a $7 member of our channel. That's 2 years and 3 months of seeing some of our special perks. And here to explain how you, too, can obtain these perks of which I speak is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Thank you. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.